Before we dive into this tense story of survival and instinct, please take a brief second to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. It helps us bring more powerful stories like this to you. Now let's begin. The bell above the door of the Daily Grind, a bustling coffee shop in downtown Chicago, chimed with a cheerful melodic ring. It was a sound that most people ignored, lost in the cacophony of grinding beans, hissing espresso machines, and the low hum of a dozen overlapping conversations. But for Jack Carter, that chime was data. Every time it rang, his eyes flicked momentarily to the entrance. Not out of fear, but out of habit. Jack was a man who did not exist, at least not in the way most people did. He was sitting at a small round table in the far corner of the room, his back pressed against the wall. This position gave him a clear, 180-degree view of the establishment. He wore a faded navy blue baseball cap, a plain gray t-shirt, and a nondescript canvas jacket. He was the definition of a gray man, someone designed to blend into the background to be utterly forgettable. If you passed him on the street, you wouldn't remember his face 5 seconds later. But underneath that generic exterior lay a mind sharpened by 20 years of service as a Navy SEAL. Jack lived his life in condition yellow. In the world of tactical awareness, condition white is total oblivion, the state of looking at your phone while walking down a dark alley. Condition yellow is relaxed alert. You aren't paranoid, but you are aware. You know where the exits are, you know who is in the room. You notice things that don't fit. And on this rainy Tuesday morning, something didn't fit. Jack took a slow sip of his black coffee, the steam rising to fog his vision momentarily. He lowered the cup and scanned the queue. There she was, the target, though she didn't know she was one yet. Emily Reyes stood in the middle of the line, juggling a diaper bag, a frantic 4-year-old boy named Leo, and a vibrating smartphone. She looked exhausted. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun that spoke of a morning rush that had started 3 hours too early. She was in condition white. Her attention was fractured, split between calming her son and checking a barrage of emails that seemed to be causing her distress. "Leo, please, just 2 more minutes, honey," she whispered, handing the boy a toy car that he immediately dropped. She bent down to retrieve it, completely exposing her blind side. That was when Jack saw him. 3 people behind Emily stood a man. He was dressed in a suit that was slightly too expensive for a mid-morning coffee run in this specific neighborhood. He wasn't looking at the menu. He wasn't looking at his phone. He was looking at the back of Emily's neck. Jack's internal radar pinged louder. He narrowed his eyes, focusing on the details. The man, let's call him the Shadow, stood with a stillness that was unnatural. Most people in line shifted their weight, checked their watches, or looked around. The Shadow was statue still. His hands were clasped in front of him, but his right hand was hovering near the lapel of his jacket. Then Jack saw the micro-movement. The Shadow turned his head slightly to the left, murmuring something. It wasn't a self-directed mumble. It was communication. Earpiece, Jack thought. He's wired. Jack watched as the Shadow took a half-step closer to Emily. It wasn't the proximity of a cue. It was the proximity of a predator closing the gap before a strike. The man's eyes darted to the door, then back to Emily, then to the heavy rain pouring outside. He was calculating. The coffee shop was crowded, but in Jack's mind, the room emptied out, leaving only the vectors of threat. The distance between the Shadow and Emily was 4 feet. The distance between Emily and the door was 20 feet. The distance between Jack and the pair was 15 feet. Jack needed more information. Was this a jealous ex-husband hiring a private investigator? Was it a debt collector? No, the posture was too professional. The suit didn't have the emotional leakage of a personal grudge. This was cold. This was tactical. Emily finally reached the counter. She ordered a latte and a cookie for Leo. As she reached for her wallet, she dropped her credit card. "Oh, for heaven's sake," she muttered, bending down again. The Shadow moved. He didn't offer to help. Instead, while she was low, he stepped to the side, blocking the view of the security camera mounted above the pastry case. It was a move so subtle that only a professional would catch it. He was creating a blind spot. Jack set his coffee down. The porcelain clicked softly against the table. The situation had escalated from observation to potential engagement. He couldn't just walk up to her and say, "Hey, that guy behind you is tracking you." If the shadow was a pro, he would have a contingency plan. A scene would cause panic, and in panic, targets get hurt. If the shadow was armed, a confrontation in a crowded room was the worst possible outcome. Jack needed a way to communicate with Emily without the shadow knowing. He needed a secure channel in the middle of a public space. He watched Emily stand up, pay, and move to the waiting area. She looked at her son, Leo, who was starting to cry. She knelt down to Leo's eye level. She didn't shout, she didn't plead. She raised her hands. Her fingers moved fluidly. "Stop. Breathe. Cookie is coming." Jack's breath hitched in his chest. She was using American Sign Language, ASL. The boy was deaf. A door opened in Jack's mind. A tactical advantage had just presented itself. Jack had spent years working with Allied forces, and in situations where silence was the only way to survive. He was fluent in ASL. He looked at the shadow. The man was busy typing a message on his phone, likely updating his team. Assuming the woman and her child were isolated in their own bubble of noise and chaos. The shadow didn't know that the language barrier between the hearing and the deaf was actually a bridge, one that he couldn't cross, but Jack could. Jack stood up. He didn't rush. He moved with the casual, lumbering gait of a tired construction worker or an off-duty mechanic. He picked up his coffee and moved toward the condiment stand, which was situated directly across from where Emily was waiting for her order. The game was on. But for Emily to survive, she had to be smart. She had to wake up from condition white and enter the reality of the danger she was in. Jack had to wake her up without making a sound. The air in the coffee shop smelled of roasted beans and wet raincoats. To Emily Reyes, it smelled like stress. She was late for her meeting at the architecture firm. Leo's hearing aid batteries were running low, and she had this nagging feeling, a heaviness in her chest she couldn't explain. She chalked it up to anxiety. Being a single mom to a special needs child while balancing a high-pressure career often felt like trying to build a house of cards in a wind tunnel. She signed to Leo again. "Be patient. Love you." Leo signed back, his small fingers clumsy but determined. "Cookie. Now." Emily managed a tired smile. She straightened up, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. As she did, she felt a presence. Someone was standing near the sugar and napkins, directly in her line of sight. She glanced up. It was a man in a baseball cap. He was big, broad-shouldered and solid, like a tree trunk. His face was weathered, with lines around his eyes that suggested he had spent a lot of time squinting into the sun. He wasn't looking at the sugar packets. He was looking directly at her. Normally, Emily would have looked away immediately. City instincts told her to avoid eye contact with staring men. But there was something different about his gaze. It wasn't predatory. It wasn't flirtatious. It was urgent, intense, commanding. He held her gaze for a split second too long, ensuring he had her attention. Then his hands moved. They moved close to his chest, subtle and contained, minimizing the visibility to anyone standing behind him or to the side. But to Emily, the movements were shouting, "Look. At me." Emily froze. Her heart skipped a beat. A random stranger in a coffee shop was signing to her. Was he deaf too? Was he just being friendly? She hesitated, her eyes darting to the barista, hoping her name would be called so she could leave. Jack saw her hesitation. He knew he had a window of about 3 seconds before she dismissed him as a weirdo and turned away. He had to drop the hammer. He had to scare her into compliance, but delicately. His face remained impassive, a mask of boredom for anyone watching, but his hands moved with military precision. Do not turn around. The specific signs he used were sharp, emphatic. The sign for turn around was arrested mid-air, negated by a firm shake of the head. Emily felt a chill crawl up her spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. The nagging feeling in her chest solidified into a knot of fear. She looked at Jack, her eyes widening slightly. Jack kept his movements small, hidden within the silhouette of his body. He took a sip of his coffee with one hand, a casual decoy motion, then continued signing with the other. Man, behind, you, black, suit. Emily's instinct was to turn. It was human nature. When someone tells you not to look, you look. Her head started to swivel. Jack's expression changed instantly. His eyes flared with intensity, and he made a sharp cutting motion with his hand, a universal sign for stop. He signed again, slower this time, emphasizing every word. Trust. Me. Danger. Emily swallowed hard. She looked down at Leo. The boy was happily oblivious, kicking his feet against the cabinet. If there was danger, Leo was the most vulnerable person in the room. That thought snapped Emily out of her confusion and into a cold, hard clarity. She looked back at Jack. She gave a barely perceptible nod. She needed to know what to do. Jack saw the shift in her eyes. The panic was still there, but the mother bear instinct had overridden the shock. She was listening. Jack shifted his stance slightly, using the condiment counter to block the line of sight between him and the shadow behind Emily. He needed to verify the threat level. He signed, "Is he alone?" Emily didn't know. She hadn't even noticed the man until Jack mentioned him. She felt a wave of nausea. How long had he been there? Following her from the apartment? From the daycare? She raised her hands tentatively, pretending to scratch her nose, then transitioned into a subtle sign. "I don't know." Jack nodded. He scanned the room again. The shadow was still there, checking his watch. He seemed to be waiting for something. A transport. A partner. Jack signed, "Check. Phone. Mirror." He wanted her to use her phone's selfie camera or the reflection in the screen to look behind her without turning her head. It was a classic tradecraft move, modernized. Emily pulled her phone out. Her hands were trembling. She unlocked the screen and opened the camera app, flipping it to the front-facing mode. She pretended to fix her hair, tilting the phone slightly. On the screen, over her shoulder, she saw him. The man in the suit. He wasn't looking at his phone anymore. He was staring at the back of her head with a look of intense, cold focus. As she watched, he reached into his jacket pocket. He didn't pull out a wallet. He pulled out a small, black device. It looked like a radio or a signal jammer. Emily's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't a robbery. This was something else. She looked back at Jack, her eyes wide with terror. "I see him." Jack signed back immediately. "Stay. Calm. I am Navy." He didn't sign Navy SEAL specifically, as the sign is complex and might be missed, but he used the sign for soldier, combined with protect. He wanted to project authority. He needed her to surrender control of the situation to him. Wait. 4. Coffee. Then, walk. to bathroom. Emily frowned. The bathroom? That was a dead end. Why would she trap herself? She signed, "Why?" Jack's eyes were hard as flint. Trap, him, need, to talk. It was a gamble. Jack needed to get Emily out of the open floor plan to confirm if the shadow would follow her into a secluded area. If the shadow followed her toward the restrooms, it confirmed intent to abduct or harm in a private space. It also gave Jack a choke point, a narrow corridor where he could intercept the threat without endangering bystanders. "Emily," the barista called out. "Latte and a cookie." The sound of her name was like a gunshot in the tense silence between them. The shadow's head snapped up. He straightened his jacket. He was ready to move. Emily grabbed her coffee and the cookie. She handed the cookie to Leo. Her hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped the cup. She looked at Jack one last time. He gave her a single, slow blink. A promise. "I've got you." Emily took a deep breath. She grabbed Leo's hand. "Come on, Leo," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "Let's wash our hands." She turned and began to walk toward the back of the shop, down the narrow hallway that led to the restrooms. Jack watched. He counted to 3. 1, 2, 3. The shadow moved. He didn't wait for his own coffee. He abandoned his place in line and followed Emily, his pace quickening. Jack crushed his empty paper cup in his hand. The confirmation was absolute. The predator was on the hunt. And now, the hunt was on. The hallway leading to the restrooms in the daily grind was narrow, dimly lit by a flickering sconce, and smelled faintly of bleach and old plumbing. It was a fatal funnel, a tactical term for a narrow passage where movement is restricted and you are vulnerable to attack. But for Jack, it was also the perfect place to ambush a shadower. Emily walked down the hall, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She held Leo's hand so tight that the boy looked up at her, confused. She quickly loosened her grip and signed, "Sorry." "Game, we are playing a game." Leo's eyes lit up. "Hide and seek?" "Yes," Emily signed. "Be quiet, very quiet." She reached the end of the hall. There were 2 doors, men and women, and a third door marked employees only, which was slightly ajar. She remembered Jack's instructions. Walk, 2, bathroom. She pushed the door to the women's restroom open but didn't go in. She let it swing shut, creating the sound of entry. But she stopped just outside, pressing herself and Leo into the small alcove of the employees-only doorway. It was a terrifying risk. If Jack was wrong, if he wasn't who he said he was, she had just cornered herself for the attacker. Back in the main room, Jack was moving. He had left his table the moment the shadow crossed the threshold of the hallway. Jack moved with deceptive speed. He didn't run. Running draws attention. He flowed. He navigated the tables and chairs, sliding past a businessman and a student, closing the distance to the hallway entrance. He needed to be the cork in the bottle. Jack reached the mouth of the hallway just as the shadow was halfway down it. The shadow was focused entirely on the restroom door at the end. He reached into his jacket again, and this time, Jack saw the glint of metal. Not a gun, but a syringe. Jack's blood ran cold. Sedative. This was a snatch and grab. They were going to knock her out, drag her out the back fire exit, which was likely at the end of that hall, and throw her into a waiting van. Professional, clean, terrifying. Jack stepped into the hallway. "Hey, buddy," Jack said. His voice was a low rumble, resonant and calm. The shadow froze. He hadn't expected anyone to be behind him. The element of surprise, the most valuable weapon in warfare, had just shifted hands. The man in the suit turned slowly. Up close, his face was blank, his eyes dead. He had the look of a man who did this for a paycheck and slept soundly at night. "Excuse me?" the shadow said, his accent indeterminate, possibly Eastern European. "I am looking for the restroom." "Restroom's full," Jack said, blocking the exit back to the main shop. He stood with his hands open, palms visible, a gesture that looked submissive to the untrained eye but was actually the starting position for a grapple. "And you dropped something." The shadow frowned. "I dropped nothing." "You dropped your cover," Jack said. The air in the hallway changed instantly. The pretense of civilization evaporated. The shadow knew he had been made. His hand twitched toward the pocket with the syringe. "Don't," Jack warned. "You're in a fatal funnel. You have no room to maneuver. I have 20 pounds on you in reach. If you reach for that needle, I will break your wrist before you clear the lining of your jacket." The shadow assessed Jack. He saw the cauliflower ear, the scar on the chin, the balanced stance. He realized this wasn't a random bystander. "Who are you?" the shadow hissed. "I'm the guy who's going to give you one chance to walk away," Jack lied. He had no intention of letting him walk away, but he needed to keep the man talking to buy Emily time to lock herself in or find an exit. Suddenly, the door at the end of the hall opened. Emily stepped out. She hadn't hidden. She had heard the voices. She had Leo behind her. "Jack," she called out, guessing the name she didn't know, just sensing the ally. The shadow's eyes flicked to Emily. A hostage. If he could grab the kid. Jack saw the thought form in the man's eyes before the muscles even fired. OODA loop. Observe, orient, decide, act. Jack had already observed and oriented. He had decided. Now he acted. The shadow lunged, not at Jack, but forward, toward Emily and the boy. He was fast, surprisingly fast, but Jack was already moving. He didn't chase. He intercepted. He stepped into the man's path, dropping his center of gravity. As the shadow tried to shoulder past him, Jack's arm shot out, hooking the man's neck in a clothesline maneuver that utilized the man's own forward momentum against him. There was a sickening thud as the shadow slammed into the wall, pinned by Jack's forearm. "Emily, get back!" Jack barked, his voice commanding. "Let me go!" The shadow snarled, thrashing. He was strong, wiry, and vicious. He kicked backward, his heel driving into Jack's shin. Jack grunted but didn't let go. He transitioned his grip, twisting the man's arm behind his back, forcing him face first into the drywall. "The needle!" Jack shouted to Emily. "Watch his hands!" Emily stood frozen for a millisecond, then the adrenaline hit. She grabbed Leo, shoved him into the women's restroom, and slammed the door. Then she turned back. She saw the syringe on the floor. It had skittered away during the impact. She kicked it down the hall, away from the struggle. "Who sent you?" Jack growled into the man's ear, applying pressure to a nerve cluster in the shoulder. "You have no idea what you are interfering with," the man spat, his face pressed against the plaster. "She is already marked. If not me, then the next one." "Well, they're going to have to get through me first," Jack said. But the situation was about to get worse. The front door of the coffee shop opened. Through the narrow view of the hallway, Jack saw two more men enter. They wore the same ill-fitting suits. They looked around, scanning the room. They were looking for their point man. "Emily," Jack said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "We have a problem." He wasn't alone. Jack was holding one man, but two more were closing in. He was in a hallway with no rear exit that he knew of. He had a civilian and a deaf child to protect. This wasn't just a confrontation anymore. It was a siege. "Is there a back door?" Jack asked, tightening his grip on the struggling captive. "Through the kitchen," Emily stammered. "The employee door." "Get Leo," Jack ordered. "We're leaving, now." But as Emily reached for the bathroom door to retrieve her son, the two men at the front of the shop spotted the commotion in the hallway. They started moving. Fast. Jack realized they wouldn't make it to the kitchen in time. He had to make a choice. Hold the choke point and fight three men, or retreat and barricade. "Change of plan," Jack said, shoving the captured shadow toward the oncoming attackers to create a human obstacle. "Get into the kitchen. Lock the door behind us." Jack grabbed Emily's arm. She grabbed Leo, and they dove through the employees-only door, just as the hallway filled with the heavy footsteps of the reinforcement team. The door clicked shut. Jack threw the deadbolt. They were in the kitchen, but they were trapped. The heavy steel door of the kitchen slammed shut, severing the visual connection to the chaotic hallway, but not the auditory one. Almost immediately, a heavy body slammed against the other side. The metal groaned in its frame. "Lock it," Jack commanded, though he was already moving to do it himself. He threw the deadbolt and then looked for a way to reinforce it. In the world of tactical defense, a lock is just a suggestion. It buys time, not safety. Jack scanned the room. It was a standard commercial kitchen. Stainless steel prep tables, a walk-in fridge, a sizzling grill that had been abandoned by the terrified cook who had fled out the back moments before they entered. "Emily, take Leo and get behind the prep table," Jack ordered, pointing to a heavy steel table bolted to the floor near the dishwashing station. "Stay low. Do not stand up until I say so." Emily scrambled, her chest heaving. She pulled Leo down, shielding his small body with her own. Leo was crying now, confused by the sudden aggression and the fear vibrating off his mother. He couldn't hear the men shouting on the other side of the door, or the sickening thuds of them trying to kick it in, but he could feel the tremors in the floorboards. Emily looked at Jack. Her hands were shaking, but she signed to Leo. Hide. Safe. Quiet. Jack didn't have a gun. He was a civilian now, and in Chicago, carrying a concealed firearm was a legal labyrinth he usually avoided to keep his profile low. He had to rely on force multipliers, objects in the environment that could equalize the odds against multiple attackers. He grabbed a commercial-grade fire extinguisher from the wall mount. He pulled the pin. Then, he grabbed a heavy cast-iron skillet from the drying rack. Thud. Thud. Crack. The door frame was splintering. The wood around the deadbolt was giving way. "They're coming in," Emily whispered, terror choking her voice. We have to call the police. I already triggered a silent alarm on my watch, Jack said calmly, positioning himself to the side of the door, not in front of it. But average response time in this district is 7 minutes. We have maybe 10 seconds. We are the first responders, Emily. This was a hard truth that Jack knew well. When seconds count, help is minutes away. The door flew open. It didn't swing, it burst inward, the lock tearing through the wood. 2 men spilled into the kitchen. They were large, wearing the same dark suits, their eyes scanning for targets. They held telescoping batons, weapons designed to break bones and force compliance without the noise of a gunshot. They expected a terrified woman and a child. They did not expect a cloud of pressurized chemical powder. Jack unleashed the fire extinguisher. A thick white plume of monoammonium phosphate blasted into the faces of the intruders. The powder did 3 things instantly. It blinded them. It coated their throats, causing immediate coughing and gagging, and it created a visual barrier that hid Jack's movements. "Move!" Jack yelled to Emily. While the men hacked and swung their batons blindly into the white fog, Jack moved in. He wasn't violent. He was efficient. He stepped inside the guard of the first man, using the cast-iron skillet to deflect a baton strike. With his free hand, he executed a palm heel strike to the man's solar plexus, crumpling him to the floor. The second man staggered out of the cloud, wiping his eyes. He saw Jack and lunged. Jack didn't block. He stepped aside, guiding the man's momentum into the stainless steel counter with a sickening crunch of impact. "Back door, now!" Jack shouted. He dropped the skillet and grabbed the fire extinguisher again, ready to use it as a battering ram if needed. He ushered Emily and Leo toward the rear exit that led to the alleyway. As they reached the heavy metal door, Emily paused, looking back at the chaos. "Go!" Jack urged, placing a hand on her back. "We have 0 margin for error." They burst out into the alley. The rain was coming down in sheets now, a cold gray curtain that washed over the grime of the city. The alley was narrow, lined with overflowing dumpsters and fire escapes. "My car is out front," Emily shouted over the rain. "No," Jack said, gripping her shoulder. "The front is burned. They'll have a driver waiting. We go on foot until we clear the kill zone." He looked down at Leo. The boy was soaked instantly, his eyes wide. He wasn't crying anymore. He was in shock. Jack knelt for 1 second, despite the danger. He looked Leo in the eyes and signed with firm, deliberate movements. "Run. Fast. Like Tiger." Leo nodded. A tiny spark of courage lit up in his eyes. He understood the assignment. Jack stood up. "Follow me. Stay close to the wall. Do not run in a straight line." They began to run through the rain-slicked alley, leaving the warmth of the coffee shop behind for the cold uncertainty of the streets. The hunt had moved from the indoors to the urban jungle, and Jack knew that the men in the kitchen were just the muscle. The real threat, the brain behind the operation, was still out there, watching, calculating, and closing in. The concept of the gray man is often misunderstood. It isn't about hiding in a dumpster. It's about blending into the baseline of the environment so effectively that the human eye slides right past you. In a rainy Chicago alley, running at full sprint attracts attention. So, as soon as they turned the corner onto a busier side street, Jack slowed them down. "Walk," he instructed, his voice low but sharp. "Put your hood up, Leo, put your hood up." They merged onto the sidewalk. The rain worked in their favor here. Everyone was rushing, heads down, umbrellas up. No one was looking at faces. They were just 3 more people trying to get out of the weather. "Where are we going?" Emily asked. Her teeth were chattering, partly from cold, mostly from the adrenaline crash. "My truck," Jack said. "I parked it 3 blocks away. It's standard procedure. Never park directly in front of the target location." You considered the coffee shop a target location?" Emily asked, bewildered. "I consider everywhere a target location," Jack replied. "It keeps you alive." They navigated the crosswalks. Jack constantly checked their 6, the area behind them. He utilized store windows as mirrors. He stopped abruptly to tie his shoe, allowing people to pass him so he could scan for anyone who stopped when they stopped. Counter-surveillance is a tedious game of cat and mouse. You have to look for the same face twice. You have to look for shoes, not jackets, because people can change jackets quickly, but they rarely change shoes. "We're clear for now," Jack said as they approached a nondescript parking garage. They walked up to the second level. Sitting in a corner spot, backed in so it could pull out immediately, combat parking, was a matte black pickup truck. It wasn't new, and it had a few dents. It had no bumper stickers, no distinguishing features. Jack unlocked it. "Get in, Leo in the middle." As they climbed into the cab, the smell of old leather and coffee was comforting. It smelled safe. Jack started the engine. It roared to life, a powerful sound that betrayed the truck's beat-up exterior. This vehicle was modified for performance, not looks. Jack pulled out of the garage, but he didn't head toward the highway. He turned into the labyrinth of surface streets. "Where are we going?" Emily asked again. She was shivering uncontrollably now. She pulled Leo onto her lap, wrapping him in a blanket Jack had pulled from behind the seat. "We need to get off the grid," Jack said, his eyes scanning the mirrors. "But first, I need you to do something very difficult." "What?" "Give me your phone." Emily clutched her purse. "My phone? It's my only connection. I need to call my mom, my boss." "Emily," Jack said, his voice softening but losing none of its intensity. "That phone is a beacon. If these guys are who I think they aren't following you. They are following the GPS ping on that device. They can turn on the microphone remotely. They can see through the camera." He held out his hand. Emily hesitated. Giving up her phone felt like cutting her lifeline. But she remembered the man in the suit, the needle, the dead look in his eyes. She handed the phone to Jack. Jack took it. He didn't turn it off. Turning it off doesn't always stop the tracking. Instead, he opened the center console of his truck and pulled out a silver metallic pouch. A Faraday bag. It was lined with metallic fabric that blocked all electromagnetic signals, cellular, GPS, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth. He dropped the phone inside and sealed the Velcro. "Now you're a ghost," Jack said. "What about Leo's hearing aids?" Emily asked, sudden panic rising. Are they Bluetooth?" Jack glanced at the rearview mirror. "Are they connected to your phone?" "Yes, for adjustments." "Turn them off," Jack said. "Just for an hour, until we get to the safe house." Emily signed to Leo. "Sorry, baby. Ears off. Quiet time." Leo frowned, touching his ears, but he obeyed. He clicked the devices off. The world went silent for him. He slumped against his mother's chest, feeling the vibration of the truck's engine, watching the rain streak across the glass. Jack drove for 40 minutes, taking a route that was illogical to any GPS. He did 3 cleaning runs, looping around blocks, taking exits, and immediately getting back on, to ensure no one was tailing them. Finally, he pulled into an industrial area near the shipyards, stopping in front of a heavy steel gate surrounding a brick warehouse. He punched a code into a keypad. The gate slid open. They drove inside. The warehouse was dimly lit, filled with crates and tools. In the center was a small, renovated living space. "This is it," Jack said, killing the engine. "Welcome to the bunker." It wasn't a home. It was a fortress disguised as a workshop. Emily opened the door and stepped down. Her legs felt like jelly. She looked at Jack. "Who are you?" she asked, the question hanging in the cold air. "Really?" Jack walked around the truck. He took off his baseball cap, revealing short, graying hair. He looked tired. "I'm just a guy who noticed something," Jack said. "But right now, I'm the only thing standing between you and whatever those men want." He knelt down to Leo, who was watching him with wide eyes. Jack smiled, a genuine warm smile that transformed his rugged face. He signed, "Safe, here. Food, soon." Leo smiled back. "Come inside," Jack said to Emily. "We have a lot to talk about, and you need to tell me exactly what you saw yesterday." "Yesterday?" Emily asked. "I didn't see anything yesterday." "You did," Jack corrected her. "You just don't know it yet. People don't send hit squads after single moms for no reason. You have something, Emily, or you know something, and we have to figure out what it is before they find this place." The bunker was surprisingly warm inside. Jack had a small kitchenette, a comfortable leather sofa, and a wall covered in monitors that showed camera feeds of the building's perimeter. Jack made hot chocolate for Leo and tea for Emily. He moved with a domestic grace that contrasted sharply with the violence he had displayed an hour ago. Emily sat on the sofa, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. Leo was on the floor, coloring in a book Jack had produced from a supply chest. "Okay," Jack said, pulling a chair opposite her. He sat with a notepad and a pen. "Let's debrief. I need you to walk me through the last 48 hours, every detail. Where you went, who you talked to, what you carried." "I'm an architect," Emily said, her voice steadying. "I work for a mid-sized firm. We design commercial spaces, malls, hospitals, nothing top secret. Did you take on any new clients recently?" "Just one," Emily said. "A tech company, Ethelgard Systems. They're building a new server farm and data center outside the city. I'm the lead on the structural retrofitting." Jack stopped writing. He looked up. "Ethelgard?" "Yes. Why?" "That's not a tech company," Jack said grimly. "That's a defense contractor front. They handle black-budget logistics, weapons tracking, secure communications." Emily frowned. "They told us they were a cloud storage provider." "They lied," Jack said. "Did you bring any files home?" "Just the blueprints for the basement levels. The foundation had some cracking issues, so I brought the schematics home to study the load-bearing walls." "Physical blueprints?" "Yes, and a USB drive with the CAD files." "Where's the drive?" "It's in my diaper bag," Emily said, pointing to the bag she had instinctively grabbed when they fled the coffee shop. Jack stood up and walked over to the bag. He handled it carefully. He found the USB drive, a sleek silver stick with no logo. "Don't plug it in," Emily warned. "It's encrypted." "I'm not going to plug it in," Jack said. "I'm going to look at it." He held it up to the light. Then he took out a small magnifying glass from his desk. He examined the casing. "Emily," Jack said softly, "this isn't a standard USB drive. See this seam here? And this tiny pinhole?" "Yes." "This is a dead drop device. It's designed to look like a storage drive, but it's actually a localized transmitter or—" He paused. "Or a container." He grabbed a small multi-tool and carefully pried the casing open. It popped apart. Inside, there was no memory chip. Instead, there was a tiny folded piece of microfilm and a micro SD card taped to the side. "You weren't given CAD files," Jack said. "Someone used you as a mule. They swapped the drives. You walked out of that building with something incredibly valuable, and they realized their mistake too late." Emily felt the room spin. Who? Who would do that? "A whistleblower, a spy, a thief, we don't know yet," Jack said. "But the people chasing you, the ones in the suits, they are the cleaners. They were sent to retrieve the data and eliminate the witness." "Eliminate," Emily whispered. She looked at Leo. "They would have—" "Yes," Jack said. "They would have." He sat back down, his face serious. "This changes everything. This isn't just a kidnapping attempt. This is national security level. If we go to the regular police, there's a 50-50 chance the precinct is compromised or they just won't believe us until it's too late." "So what do we do?" Emily asked, tears welling up again. "I can't live like this. I have a son." "We go on the offensive," Jack said. "In the SEAL teams, we have a saying, violence of action. When you are ambushed, you don't retreat. You attack into the ambush. You disrupt their momentum." He stood up and walked to a large metal cabinet in the corner. He unlocked it. Inside were rows of tactical gear, radios, vests, and yes, firearms. "I need to know what is on this card," Jack said, "but I don't have the decryption keys here. I have an old contact, a friend from the teams. He specializes in cyber warfare. He lives 4 hours from here, in a cabin in Wisconsin." "Wisconsin? It's remote, it's defendable, and he's the only person I trust." Jack turned to her. "We leave in 10 minutes. Take a shower, change into these dry clothes." He tossed her a bundle of oversized sweats. "We have a long night ahead of us." Emily looked at the clothes, then at Leo, then at Jack. She realized she had crossed a threshold. The life she knew, the coffee runs, the architectural drawings, the quiet nights, was gone. She was now in Jack's world, a world of shadows, signals, and silence. She stood up. She walked over to Leo and touched his shoulder. He looked up. She signed, adventure, car ride, sleep later. Then she looked at Jack. She didn't say thank you. It wasn't enough. She signed one word to him, a sign she hoped he knew. Partner. Jack nodded. Partner. They were a team now, and they were going to war. The rain had turned from a steady drizzle into a torrential downpour, turning the interstate heading north into a river of asphalt and reflected neon. Inside the matte black pickup truck, the atmosphere was a mix of exhaustion and hypervigilance. Jack drove with one hand on the wheel, his eyes constantly flicking between the road ahead and the mirrors. He wasn't speeding. Speeding attracts the highway patrol, and getting pulled over would mean creating a digital record of their location. A disaster when you are trying to disappear. Condition red, Jack murmured to himself. What? Emily asked. She was sitting in the passenger seat, Leo asleep across her lap. She had changed into the dry clothes Jack provided, a thick flannel shirt and cargo pants that were too big but warm. It's the Cooper color code, Jack explained, keeping his voice low to avoid waking the boy. White is unaware, yellow is relaxed alert, orange is specific alert, you see a potential threat. Red is fight mode. We are currently in red. We aren't fighting with fists right now, but we are fighting with distance. Every mile we put between us and Chicago is a victory. Do you think they are following us? Emily asked, twisting in her seat to look out the back window. Not visually, Jack said. I cleared our tail 3 exits ago, but they have other ways. Like what? Traffic cameras, license plate readers, even satellite thermal imaging if they have high enough clearance, which, judging by the hardware they carried, they might. Jack slowed down as they approached a dark stretch of highway bordered by dense forest. He pulled onto the shoulder, seemingly in the middle of nowhere. Why are we stopping? Emily whispered, panic flaring again. To change our signature, Jack said. He popped his door open and stepped out into the rain. He moved to the back of the truck. From a hidden compartment in the truck bed, he pulled out a screwdriver and a different license plate, one caked in mud, belonging to a farm vehicle from a different state. Within 60 seconds, he had swapped the plates. He jumped back into the driver's seat, dripping wet. Now we are a local farm truck, he said, wiping his face, not a city vehicle fleeing the scene. As they merged back onto the highway, Jack glanced at Emily. She looked shattered. The reality of her situation was settling in like a heavy stone. You're doing good, Jack told her. I'm terrified, she admitted. I'm an architect, Jack. I design libraries. I worry about load-bearing walls and sunlight angles. I don't know how to do this. You already did the hardest part, Jack said. You trusted your gut. Most people, when they see danger, they deny it. They normalize it. Oh, that guy isn't following me. He's just going the same way. That noise wasn't a gunshot. It was a car backfiring. Denial kills. You accepted the reality and you moved. That puts you in the top 1% of survivors. Emily looked down at Leo. He was sleeping peacefully, his small chest rising and falling. His hearing aids were still in her pocket, turned off. He can't hear the rain, Emily said softly. Sometimes I worry that his world is too quiet. But tonight, I'm glad he can't hear the fear in my voice. Jack nodded. Silence can be a shield. We used it in the teams. Hand signals aren't just for silence. They are for clarity. When bullets are flying and ears are ringing, you can't hear orders. But you can see a sign. It cuts through the chaos. He paused, then added, You and Leo. You have a bond most people don't understand. That language you share? It saved your life back there. If you had to speak out loud to him, the shadow would have known you were onto him instantly. Emily managed a faint smile. So, being a special needs mom made me tactical? Adaptability is the core of tactics, Jack said. You adapt every day for him. You're more ready for this than you think. Suddenly, Jack's eyes narrowed. He checked the side mirror. A pair of headlights had appeared about half a mile back. They were moving fast, much faster than the flow of traffic. They wove between 2 semi-trucks. Hold on, Jack said, his tone shifting from philosophical to sharp. Is it them? Maybe, or just a drunk driver, but we don't take chances. Jack killed the headlights. Jack, you can't see, Emily cried out. I can, Jack said. He flipped a switch on the dashboard. The dashboard lights went dark, but a small screen illuminated with a greenish-gray image. Infrared driving lights. They can't see me, but I can see the road. The black truck vanished into the darkness of the night, invisible to the naked eye but tearing down the highway at 80 miles per hour. The headlights behind them sped past, continuing down the road, chasing a ghost that wasn't there. Jack waited until the tail lights disappeared, then flipped his regular lights back on. That was close, Jack exhaled. We're getting close to the safe house. We need to be ready for anything. The cabin was less of a vacation home and more of a bunker built into the side of a limestone ridge. Located deep in the Chequamegon-Nicolet National Forest, it was accessible only by a single dirt logging road that wound through towering pines. It was 3:00 a.m. when they arrived. The rain had stopped, replaced by a thick, freezing fog. Jack stopped the truck at a heavy iron gate blocked by a keypad. He didn't type in a code. Instead, he flashed his headlights. 3 long, 2 short, 1 long. A moment later, a floodlight blinded them from a tree stand 50 yards away. "Driver, step out! Hands where I can see them!" a voice boomed over a loudspeaker. Jack stepped out. He raised his hands, but then he signed into the glare of the light. Frogman. Blue. Trident. The light cut off immediately. The gate buzzed and swung open. "Get back in," Jack said. They drove up the driveway. Waiting on the porch of the cabin was a man in a wheelchair. He had a thick beard, long hair tied back, and a blanket over his legs. A modified shotgun rested across his lap. This was Miller, a former signals intelligence officer who had lost the use of his legs in an IED blast in Afghanistan. He was the best hacker Jack had ever known. "You look like hell, Carter," Miller grumbled as they climbed out of the truck. "Good to see you too, Miller," Jack said, gripping the man's hand. "We have a package." Miller looked at Emily, then at Leo, who was rubbing his sleepy eyes. "You brought civilians to a black site? You must be desperate." "They aren't just civilians," Jack said. "They are the target." Inside, the cabin was a technological marvel. Servers hummed in the basement, keeping the room warm. Multiple screens lined the walls, displaying code streams and satellite maps. "Coffee is in the pot," Miller said, rolling his wheelchair to the main desk. "Give me the drive." Jack handed over the disassembled USB device. Miller put on a pair of magnifying spectacles and went to work. He connected the micro SD card to an isolated, air-gapped computer, one that was physically disconnected from the internet to prevent any malware from phoning home. For 20 minutes, the only sound was the clicking of Miller's keyboard and the crackle of the fireplace. Emily sat on a rugged couch holding Leo, watching the screen with a mixture of dread and curiosity. "Bingo," Miller whispered. "What is it?" Jack asked, leaning over his shoulder. Encryption was military-grade, but older stuff. Ethelgard got lazy, Miller muttered. He pulled up a series of documents and blueprints. "These aren't just structural designs," Miller said, his voice dropping. "This is Project Aegis." "What is Project Aegis?" Emily asked. Miller turned his chair around. Ethelgard Systems has a contract to supply the new reactive armor plating for military transport vehicles. Humvees, troop carriers, the stuff that keeps our boys safe from roadside bombs. He pointed to a spreadsheet on the screen. "These are the stress test results. The armor is failing. It cracks under 60% of the required pressure. If an IED hits one of these trucks, the armor won't stop the shrapnel. It will shatter and become shrapnel itself." Emily gasped. "Oh my God." "It gets worse," Miller continued. "Here is an email chain between the CEO and the lead engineer. They know. They know it fails, but they are behind schedule and over budget. They decided to falsify the test data, ship the defective armor, and fix it in Phase 2 via a recall next year." "Next year?" Jack's voice was ice cold. "Do you know how many soldiers will die in a year?" "Thousands," Miller said. "And not just soldiers. This armor is being sold to police departments for SWAT teams. It's being used in VIP transport." Jack looked at Emily. "You were carrying the proof. The original, unaltered test data. The whistleblower who put that drive in your bag was trying to stop a massacre. Emily looked at the drive, a small piece of plastic. It felt heavy now, heavier than lead. If we release this, Emily said, Ethelgard is finished. Their stock goes to zero, their executives go to prison. That's why they sent the cleaners, Jack said. They aren't protecting a trade secret. They are protecting their lives. They are facing life sentences for treason and fraud. So what do we do? Emily asked. Upload it to the news? Not yet, Miller said. If I upload this now, their cybersecurity team will flag the traffic. They'll scrub the servers, delete the backups, and claim this is a fake. We need to send this directly to the Pentagon's Inspector General, and we need to do it through a secure channel that verifies the authenticity. Can you do that? Jack asked. Yes, but I need about an hour to tunnel through their firewall so I can plant the file directly on their internal server. That way, it looks like it came from inside. Undeniable. Do it, Jack said. Suddenly, a red light on the wall began to strobe silently. Miller spun his chair toward the perimeter monitors. We have a problem, Miller said. On the screen, grainy night vision footage showed figures moving through the trees. Not 2 or 3, a dozen. They found us, Emily whispered. They didn't track the car, Jack realized. Miller, did you turn on the signal to crack the encryption? I had to ping the satellite to get the decryption key, Miller admitted, his face pale. It was a burst transmission, less than a second, but if they were listening... They were listening, Jack said grimly. He walked over to the gun rack. He grabbed a rifle and tossed a heavy tactical vest to Miller. Emily, Jack said, turning to her. Remember the game we played in the coffee shop? Emily nodded, terrified but focused. We're playing it again, but this time the prize isn't a cookie, it's survival. Jack moved to the window and peered out through the blinds. They are setting up a perimeter. They want to breach and clear. They think they are hunting a cripple and a woman. Jack racked the slide of his rifle. They forgot about the Navy SEAL. The cabin went dark. Jack cut the main breaker. Now the advantage of the night belonged to the ones inside, provided they knew the terrain. Miller, how long on the upload? Jack asked. 45 minutes, Miller replied, his fingers flying across a backlit keyboard. I can't stop it now. If I disconnect, the data corrupts. 45 minutes, Jack repeated. Okay. He turned to Emily. Take Leo to the panic room in the basement. It's behind the bookshelf. It has reinforced steel walls. Lock it from the inside. Do not open it for anyone but me or Miller. We have a code word. What's the code word? Emily asked, hugging Leo tight. Sunrise, Jack said. If you don't hear sunrise, you don't open that door. Emily grabbed Jack's arm. Jack, please be careful. Go, he said gently. As Emily disappeared into the hidden room, the first glass shattered. A canister of tear gas crashed through the front window, hissing and spewing white smoke. Jack didn't panic. He had anticipated this. He put on a gas mask he had pulled from Miller's supply. He didn't fire yet. He waited. The front door exploded inward with a concussive blast. Go, 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 voices shouted. Professional, disciplined. 3 men in tactical gear stormed into the living room, their weapon lights cutting through the smoke. Jack was waiting in the shadows of the kitchen hallway. He wasn't using a gun yet. He used a flashbang grenade. He tossed it into the center of the room. Bang! The sound was deafening, the flash blinding. The 3 attackers staggered, their night vision goggles whited out by the intensity of the light. Jack moved. He engaged the first target, using the butt of his rifle to strike the man's helmet, sending him crashing into the coffee table. The second man swung his weapon, but Jack was inside his guard, sweeping his legs. The third man fired blindly. Bullets tore into the drywall. Miller, from his position behind a hardened desk in the corner, opened fire with his shotgun. The spread of the buckshot kept the attackers pinned near the door. Jack! Flanking! East window! Miller shouted. Jack spun around. 2 more men were trying to climb through the kitchen window. It was a chaotic swirl of noise, smoke, and violence. Jack fought with a calculated brutality. He didn't shoot to kill unless necessary. He shot to neutralize. A leg shot here, a shoulder shot there. He needed to slow them down, to deplete their manpower. But there were too many of them. "They're cutting through the back door," Miller yelled. Jack realized their position was collapsing. The living room was filling with smoke. The upload bar on Miller's screen was at 60%. "Miller, give me the drive," Jack shouted. "We have to move to the basement." "I can't," Miller yelled back. "The upload needs the hardline connection. If we unplug, we lose it." Jack looked at the front door. More men were massing outside. They were preparing a heavy assault. They weren't trying to capture anyone anymore. They were authorized to burn it down. Jack made a choice that goes against every survival instinct, but is the core of what it means to be a protector. "Miller, keep the upload going," Jack ordered. "I'm going outside." "What? You're crazy. That's suicide. If I stay in here, they flank us and grenade the room. I need to draw their fire. I need to make them look at me, not the computer." Jack checked his magazine. Full. He checked his sidearm. Full. He looked at the basement door where Emily and Leo were hiding. He hoped they couldn't hear the gunfire. He hoped Leo was just feeling the vibrations and thinking it was thunder. "Cover me!" Jack yelled. He didn't go out the back. He charged out the front door, right into the teeth of the enemy formation. He burst onto the porch, his rifle roaring. He caught the team by surprise. No one expects the target to counterattack into a superior force. Jack sprinted toward the tree line, firing suppressed bursts, drawing the enemy's attention. "Target is mobile! Target is outside!" the enemy commander shouted over the radio. "Pursue! Pursue!" Jack ran into the dark, freezing woods. He was the rabbit now. He was leading the wolves away from the cabin, away from the upload, and away from the mother and child hiding in the dark. He dove behind a fallen log as bullets chewed up the bark above his head. He checked his watch. 20 minutes remaining. He just had to stay alive for 20 minutes against a hit squad of 12 elite mercenaries. Jack took a deep breath of the cold air. "Come and get me," he whispered. Jack moved through the freezing darkness of the forest like a ghost. His breath plumed in the cold air, but he kept his heart rate controlled. He wasn't trying to win a gunfight against 12 men. He was trying to buy time. He fired a single shot to the north, then sprinted 30 yards to the south. "Over there! Flank him!" a voice shouted in the distance. The mercenaries were disciplined, but they were arrogant. They assumed Jack was cornered. In reality, he was leading them into a swampy depression in the terrain, a natural kill box, where their movement would be slowed by deep mud. A bullet snapped a pine branch just inches from Jack's ear. He didn't flinch. He checked his watch. 5 minutes left. He felt a vibration in the earpiece he had taken from Miller. "Upload at 98%, Miller's voice crackled, tense but steady. "Don't die yet, Jack." "I'm busy," Jack whispered. Suddenly, a spotlight swept through the trees. They had a drone. Jack pressed himself flat against the mossy ground. He was out of tricks. He had 2 magazines left, a sprained ankle, and they were closing the net. He saw 3 silhouettes moving toward him. Confident now, they raised their weapons. Then the sky exploded with noise. Not gunfire, rotors. "Upload complete," Miller shouted in his ear. "The cavalry is here." Jack looked up. 2 Black Hawk helicopters roared over the tree line, their searchlights turning night into day. These weren't police choppers. They were military. The Inspector General hadn't just sent an email. They had sent a response team. "Federal agents, drop your weapons." A voice amplified from the sky shook the trees. The mercenaries froze. They were contractors, here for a paycheck, not a suicide mission against the U.S. Army. Weapons clattered to the ground. The fight went out of them instantly. Jack slumped against a tree, the adrenaline finally draining away, leaving him exhausted. He didn't cheer. He just closed his eyes for a second and breathed. It was over. The scene at the cabin was a flurry of activity. FBI agents were cataloging evidence, paramedics were checking Miller, and the mercenaries were being zip-tied and loaded into transport vans. Jack walked through the chaos, ignoring the medics who tried to stop him. He limped straight to the basement door inside the cabin. The house was safe now, but he knew that for Emily, the terror wouldn't end until she saw a friendly face. He knocked 3 times. "Emily," he called out, his voice hoarse. "Sunrise." There was a pause, a scrape of a heavy lock, and the door creaked open. Emily stood there, clutching a flashlight as a weapon. When she saw Jack, dirty, bruised but alive, she dropped the light. She didn't say a word. She just collapsed into him, sobbing. Jack held her, patting her back awkwardly but gently. "It's okay, they're gone. You did it." Leo peeked out from behind the bookshelf. He looked scared, unsure of the flashing lights upstairs. Jack knelt down, wincing from his ankle pain. He looked Leo in the eyes. He didn't use words. He signed, "Bad. Men, gone. We, win." Leo's face broke into a massive grin. He signed back, "Superhero." Jack laughed, a dry, raspy sound. He shook his head. "No, just a friend." An FBI agent in a windbreaker approached them. "Mr. Carter, Ms. Reyes, we need to debrief you. The Pentagon is very interested in what you found. You just saved a lot of lives overseas." Emily wiped her eyes. She looked at Jack. "We saved lives?" "Yeah," Jack said, looking at the drive in the agent's hand. "You did good, partner." 3 months later, the bell above the door of a new coffee shop in a quiet suburb chimed. Emily was behind the counter, arranging pastries. She looked different, rested, happier. The dark circles were gone. She wasn't checking her phone every 5 seconds. She was in condition yellow, aware but calm. Leo was sitting at a corner table drawing in a sketchbook. He had new hearing aids, top of the line, paid for by the consulting fee the government had awarded them for their assistance. The door opened, and a man walked in. He wore a simple gray t-shirt and a baseball cap. He waited in line, ordered a black coffee, and moved to the pickup counter. Emily turned to hand him the cup and froze. "Jack?" He looked up, smiling. The lines on his face seemed softer. "Hey, Emily. Just passing through." "Passing through?" she asked, leaning over the counter. "You disappeared for 3 months. Miller told me you went to Alaska. Needed some quiet." Jack shrugged. "Fishing is good this time of year." He took a sip of the coffee. "This is better than the last place." "It's mine," Emily said proudly. "I quit the firm. Used the reward money to start my own place. It's safer. Simpler." Jack nodded approvingly. "Good situational awareness. You control the environment." Leo looked up and saw Jack. He scrambled off his chair and ran over, hugging Jack's leg. Jack patted the boy's head. He signed, "Good to see you, Tiger." Leo signed back. "Stay?" Jack hesitated. He was a wanderer, a gray man. Staying meant attachment, and attachment meant vulnerability. But looking at Emily's warm smile and Leo's hopeful eyes, he realized that perhaps the mission had changed. He signed to Leo, maybe for a little while. He looked at Emily. "I could use a refill." "On the house," she said, her eyes shining. "Always." Jack took his coffee and sat at a table near the wall, facing the door, of course. He wasn't just a customer, he was a guardian. And for the first time in a long time, he wasn't looking for a threat. He was just enjoying the view. Narrator voiceover. Awareness isn't about living in fear. It's about seeing the world clearly, so you can protect the things that matter. Jack Carter didn't need a weapon to save Emily. He needed to pay attention. In a world full of distractions, the most powerful tool you have is your eyes. Stay safe, stay alert, and watch out for each other. The end. If you enjoyed this story, please like and comment "I am aware" below to show you made it to the end.